Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'm Óran O'Neill. Tonight we are talking about cognitive overload, and I'd like to thank Roz Chambers for joining me. We had a discussion about this last week, and I managed to twist Roz's arm and get her in to talk about this subject. We did have another guest advertised, James Flanagan, but unfortunately he wasn't able to make it tonight due to other commitments that came up suddenly, but he will be joining us. I think it's going to be towards the end of June, so stay tuned for that, as they say. Roz, this is something that has been on my radar for a little while, but Roz, you've been researching this for a little while now. Why did you want to look at this? Can you tell me first of all?
Well, I'm training people, and it's been an ongoing thing when we're training people to say that we need to be very cognizant of what blind and partially sighted listeners are dealing with while they're also listening to the audio description. And I just wanted to find out what the ideas were behind it. Really, it was, we say we can say things like don't do too much and don't step on the dialogue and all of those things that are basic level, but I wanted to hear from the users and the listeners themselves what constitutes too much to them. But I want to just to start a little bit by talking about the sort of memory that you're using in order to listen to audio description. So it's sort of giving us sort of an underpinning to the work that we do, so that when we teach, we have an idea of what we are trying to achieve as describers. And we can only do that in discussion with the people who listen to us.
And have you got any feedback so far from VI users?
Yes, I have. A few people have come back to me on LinkedIn, and friends have come through to say what constitutes overload to them. And I think one of the problems is something that we often say is that the best description is the description you don't notice. And you go, oh, yeah, of course, that makes sense. We don't want to sort of speak to the people afterwards and say, what colour was the dog? Because that's really not important. We want to know whether they enjoyed the show and whether the audio description contributed to that. And certainly in film and TV, we don't have access to that audience. So it's only when they come forward and say, oh, that worked or that didn't work, that we know. So I feel that if we want to, we need to listen to our listeners, but also we need to sort of have the understanding of what it is that constitutes cognitive overload and the elements that go up to make it.
Have you found yourself, when you're listening to audio description, whether it be in theatre, film or TV, have you actually found the overload happening to you at any stage?
Not so much overload, because if it's done well, it does seem to blend in very well. Of course, I've got sight, so I'm using two channels to get the information. I'm using the oral channel and I'm using the sight channel. That's not available to most of the people who listen to us. Although, most people have some sight, it may not be the sort of level of sight that's going to be very useful to them. But I find that I notice description when it transgresses, I suppose, the things that I've been taught and that I've heard. For example, I was listening to audio description on a show on Netflix called Big Mistakes. And Big Mistakes is about a family, a divorced mother and three adult children, and they get drawn into a sort of like a mafia ring, but gangsters. And there were 2 points in that I found just jumped out at me. I went, oh, and I sort of stopped listening, missed the next bit, and then got back into it. One of them was when two of the gangsters are having a fight and they're rolling around the floor together. There are other gangsters who are in the same room and they're watching them sort of rather impassively. These people are at each other, rolling around the floor, and the doorbell goes. And one of them disengages and goes to get to the doorbell. And he opens the door and this character is here. And they say, so-and-so is here. And then they say, there's taxidermy bear in the lobby, and then he walks into the room. So suddenly there was this taxidermy bear appearing, and as a sighted person, I have been told not to notice it, and the way I've been told not to notice it is that it's partially in shadow, and it's partially blurred, mostly blurred, and all of the things in the everything else is in focus. So I've been told this is not very important. The describer thought it was very important. It is never seen again. It is never mentioned again. It was not there before. Nobody's bear wrestled it and has used it as a trophy. It is just there. And I just thought, well, what consequence is that for somebody who's listening to it, who suddenly has this taxidermy bear and thinking, is it a polar bear? Is it a grizzly bear? Is it a koala bear? What kind of bear is it? And meanwhile, they've missed something else. The other thing that I found difficult was there were two people, the mother and one of the sisters, and this thing is 32 minutes long. And at 23 minutes, in the middle of a funeral, while they're sitting round the grave, the audio describer felt it was necessary to describe one of them as having long curly hair and the other one to have a floaty bob. And I just felt, please don't. This is, there were times if you wanted to describe their hair, but people have said to me, it's such a sighted thing talking about hair. For a sighted person, it's very noticeable. You judge people's age, you judge people's health by their hair. You recognize that it's dyed. I am the only person in most rooms who's ever dyed my hair, but most people use a color of some kind. A man may have a shaved head, or he may have shoulder length hair, and it's something that you notice, and you sort of categorize people by their hair. And I think sometimes we forget that if that information isn't available to people, how important is it?
Yeah. Particularly, how important is it 23 minutes into a program?
Oh, quite.
It almost seems to be as if there is a gap in the audio, and the audio describer seems to think, well, I should put something in here now. So why don't I add in the color of the character's hair at this point, or what they're wearing? Whereas I would always say, well, if you're going to do that, let's do it as early as possible, and only if it's relevant and we need to know that for some particular reason.
A facial expression might have been more relevant at that point.
Yeah.
When you are training describers, one of the first things they do is I want to tell you absolutely everything, because if you could see, this is what you would see. And what they don't recognize is that you might see things, but you don't actually notice them. You're as a sighted person, you sort of slide over it. And somebody who is partially sighted or blind, they have to get the information in a linear fashion. So you have to grab something, remember it, go on to the next thing while still remembering the first thing and linking it together. And it's a very exhausting thing, I would imagine.
It is, yeah.
I just got Laura coming in on the chat saying that she's talking about hair description in Wuthering Heights. Can we let Laura in? Come in?
Absolutely.
Hi, it's Laura here.
Hi, Laura.
Hello. I had an interesting discussion with Roz about this on LinkedIn, because as Roz has just touched on, I kind of felt sometimes the descriptions that are put in are quite a cited thing, and I wonder how much people would sort of care about that. But one of the things that we discussed was that, for example, in the recent Wuthering Heights film, Margot Robbie's hair being blonde instead of dark haired seemed to be quite something that was talked about a lot on social media and sort of generally with reviews. And so that was quite an interesting one, because it sort of, if you didn't say anything about it, then you couldn't be part of that conversation. But actually it had no real relevance to the plot line, but it was just something that was quite an interesting thing, because it was Roz was saying it sort of formed quite a lot of the discussion afterwards, and you would be sort of missed out of that whole piece. So it's and I suppose you can never quite tell whether those things are going to come up. But yeah, I just thought that was an interesting point, because I'd not really thought about that. I thought about it being sort of perhaps not very relevant, but actually maybe there are situations where it is.
You've got to keep your eye on the zeitgeist, really, because
Yeah.
people are talking about certain things. In Bridgerton, they're talking about things. There was Liz Gottman, who's here, wrote the description for Bridgerton, certainly in the first. Which ones did you do, Liz?
I've done all of them.
You did the carriage scene, didn't you?
I sure did.
Anybody who's visually impaired would like to speak, please unmute yourself and just let us know who you are.
Vlada?
Hello, everybody. I'm from Latvia, and I'm visually blind from birth. And regarding this cognitive overload, I'm wondering, for example, as I never saw this world like sighted people, for me, cognitive overload is quite usual thing when we are talking about modern art or complicated objects. For example, if you see especially some architectures, buildings with a complicated architecture, I'm wondering if you did a reflection with the people who are blind from birth, what is overload for them if in the building, as you already mentioned that sighted people are also they don't pay attention to everything, but where is the border, so to say? Is it normal that this cognitive overload comes so fast? I mean, when it comes to the details of the describing of some complicated things. Thank you.
There are two things I'd like to say to that. One is that architecture is a particular thing. I mean, you can talk about something that's beautiful architecture, like a cathedral or a palace or something like that. But you can also talk about where am I now, which is also about architecture. And when I'm training, if we're training in a particular room or a particular place, I will ask the blind trainer who works alongside me to describe the space first. And they will describe it obviously using very, very different terms to the one I would, because I would probably be looking at the cherubs over the fireplace and all that kind of thing. But they will be talking about the sound, they will be talking about the feel, they will be talking about where the light is coming from. They'll be talking about lots and lots of different things. And then I would ask them, what else would you like to know? And get the trainees to fulfill what it is that they want to know. And often they don't want to know a great deal. They might want to know where the door is, and they might want to know where the window is, and they might want to know if there are any obstacles. But often they're not terribly interested. They're looking at it as a functional space rather than an aesthetic space, if they're sitting in it.
Yes, I totally agree with you. But now I'm talking when, for example, there is audio description of the object in the museum, for example, or elsewhere, and people can touch, for example, in a touch tours for the 3D model, and to listen. Yes, I totally agree with you. When you are in this building, of course, only functional is important. But when you're from the aesthetic point of view, when you're touching the 3D model and you listen the audio description.
With museums and galleries, there are different ways of approaching it. You might have an audio guide that you can sort of go around. You'll have 10 items perhaps on a list that you will go around, and they will be described for you. And then you need to listen, and you have to listen maybe for 3 or 4 minutes to get the full information. It'll include the information that's on the object label, the provenance, the artist, and so on. And it will also describe the piece. And we normally start with an overview. And then we know what it is. We know what materials it's made from. We know where it is in relation to you. If I've got some sight, do I need to direct my gaze to the floor or up or to the side or wherever it may be? What's in it? What's the subject? What's the technique? What are the brush strokes? All of that for a painting. For a 3D object, again, you want to know how big it is. You want to know how why it's here. What is the wow factor about the thing that's here? Rather than having a an audio guide, I've had a lot of people say they would rather have a descriptive conversation with somebody who knows something about the collection. And when I say a descriptive conversation, I mean, we'll start with the overview. Right, what else would you like to know? And it becomes a conversation, and then people can decide for themselves whether they're more interested in it, whether they want to move on, whether they have anything that they're bringing to the table because they know something about that part of the world that this object is from, or anything else. So I think, and in some cases, you have description that is not really description, but ekphrasis, which is a term that is used for describing a piece of art in a different way. Now, that's sometimes like audio description, but it's often quite poetic. It uses quite poetic language. So there are a lot of different ways of approaching an object or a painting in a museum.
So it's regarding the touch tour for sure.
Yeah.
But if it's individual, I came to the museum where is already audio description. So audio describer did this work before, and I'm listening it. So she how should she describe, or he, for me, how much not to overload. So I'm wondering if very short. If there are many details in the object, in the complicated object, should the describer describe all of that, or just
let's talk to some other
Well, can I just ask
partially sighted people and get their opinion.
Can I just ask, Lola, what is your opinion about that?
For me, because I'm now also in the discussion, and I'm wondering myself how it's better. For me, it's I'm a great interest to know everything. But from the other hand, when I start to touch the object, when I start to listen, I feel how I feel this overload. But I don't want to miss, the details, some things. So for me now, I'm really thinking about it.
Well, let's put it out to the rest of the room. Does anybody else have an opinion on this?
Yep, Shami?
Hi, Shami.
Hi. Hello. I would describe as partially blind. I have a little bit of residual eyesight. I'm also partially deaf, and I lost sight and hearing about 8 years ago. So I'm I'm getting somewhere now with audio description and other facets of life that make my life sort of enhanced. But I'm so interested in this. This is such an interesting conversation, and I think there's two elements to it. I think as people with little or no sight, we can get really overwhelmed by too much language, and obviously we're in a world where we're bombarded by different kinds of media anyway. So sometimes less is more, because it is completely overwhelming and fatiguing and exhausting. And we're kind of tuning into sounds, and, we don't want to be talked at too much, but we do want the right information. But I also think you need to leave space for kind of creative curiosity. So I think what you were just saying about sort of context and background and an overview is really important, so that we can have space to kind of just reflect, digest, and think about things that we would like to know about it, and fill in the gaps with our own imagination as well.
Janet and Keith, or whether it's Janet or Keith would like to speak.
Well, we're both here, but I'm the one who's blind. So
Yes.
I love all the words. I love hearing everything, the description about it. And if the audio describer has chosen the right things, I'm willing to listen to it all, because to me, more is better than less. I don't like wondering and trying to figure things out on my own.
Yeah, I think it's different when you're working in film and TV. It's I suppose it's positive. It's streaming. If you're confused about something, you can wind it back and start again. When you're reading, you can go back and start again. But when you're in the theatre, it just is relentless. It just comes at you, and there's no way of stopping it. And you've just got to take in what's going on. So theatre description is slightly different again. But I agree with you that it's well-chosen language, isn't it, that makes a difference.
Exactly.
Can I ask you, when you're saying you like to hear kind of as much as there is, are you then able to visualize what's there?
I am, because I was fully sighted until I was 9 and gradually lost my sight. So I have a very vivid imagination, and as the better the describer, the more vividly I see things.
Yeah. So I think the difference potentially is that if you have somebody who's blind from birth, who has no idea of what X, Y, or Z looks like, then there might be the slight overkill.
Sure,
But where is the balance between that? I suppose that's where we have to find it.
I think that's absolutely right. I was talking to Yusuf Osman, who started this group up, and I was talking to him, and I was saying, what is it that you want? We started talking about characters, and I said to him, if I say to you, a person is blonde and they're wearing a green dress, what is it that you're getting? Now, he's been blind since he was about 3. He has no memory. He said to me, I couldn't tell you what black or brown or yellow was like. I haven't got that kind of imaging, but I do have a mental map. I'm not seeing the thing, but I have a mental map. And he said, if you do this thing where you just go 20 minutes in, they've got brown hair, it doesn't help him, he said, because until you give him a little bit more information, his image of somebody is one-dimensional. He said it's like a silhouette. And then suddenly you put colour in, you think green. He goes, okay, I know what green is like. I know what it can mean. And I know what blonde hair is like. It's seen as something that's a very positive thing for a young woman to have blonde hair. And he said, I feel that if I ran my fingers through it, it would feel very silky. And it would kind of squeak when I touched it because it would be so clean. So that is a mental map that doesn't necessarily include sight, but it is something that he finds satisfying. And if a description is given, he said, and they don't move until you tell me how they move. So I've got this mental image of somebody who is a silhouette, and then I tell them they've got blonde hair, a long green dress. Okay, long green dress. So they would perhaps have a different kind of movement than if they were wearing a short green dress or green shorts. So you put in the fact that she glides or that she runs. If she runs, then she's perhaps got her green dress hoiked up around her knees to make it easier for her to run. So having that image of movement as well makes that much more rounded. I feel I've got a 3-dimensional character there. We've got Carly's finger up.
I've just started on the audio description. I've just qualified, so I'm not coming.
Congratulations!
Thank you very much. In Ireland, actually, it's a very small observation, but something about especially when you're doing touch tours, and perhaps when you're in the theatre, the moment being able to give presence and be present with someone, but not necessarily to be filling all of the space with words, but to just be there. And to not then feel that you have to fill up all of the silence. And I think that's about feeling a sort of stability and a calmness within yourself, that you don't have to just keep talking for the sake of it. And then the most realistic question of what would you like to know? Because everybody's sense and obsessions about certain things are different, no? So that then that person can go, oh, but what size is it? What is the sense of it in relation to my body? And then I think you can discuss that, but that's if there's that space for that discussion, I guess. But yeah, it was about presence and being okay with silence, really. Feeling that you're not doing somebody an injustice because you're not talking. You're allowing them to hear those subtleties in sound and somehow to sense the energetics of something.
I think silence is a very interesting one, actually. I will come back to it later on, but is there anybody else who wanted to come in and talk about what they found useful? And everybody has a very different the thing is that everybody has a very different experience of everything, of when they lost their sight, how much sight they have left, but also their education, their passions, their whether they're very musical or not. All of these things make up a human being. But the artwork is one thing. The artwork is one thing. It is the artwork telling us what's important, and I think that's sometimes forgotten. Because in the theatre, you are directed just as much as the actors on stage are directed, because the lighting will help you. The lighting suddenly, the lighting will shift and it will perhaps obscure one thing and highlight another thing, or it will be a different color and you'll think, okay, fine, there's an emotional touch to that, or we just want to say that it's moonlight or it's a dawn.
It's Charmaine again.
Yeah.
Hi, Charmaine.
Hi. I had quite a unique experience, actually. And, I said I'm very much evolving with audio description and everything else I'm doing, sort of 8 and a bit years in. But I went to the National Theatre on Saturday to see an audio described matinee of Les Liaisons Dangereuses. And as much as my sort of feel and my appreciation of audio description, I'm also getting au fait with the headsets and how they work, bearing in mind that I am a deafblind person.
Oh, yes.
So, and the National is so much better now at giving you space around, great on access around the performance, so that I could have a conversation with the person that handed me the headset. They've got some new headsets. There's still the stethoscope style arrangement, but they seem to be very ergonomically sort of satisfying. I was very happy with the way it felt. It's very lightweight. I had to take my hearing aid out because I wear a hearing aid in my right ear, but I don't hear well in my right ear at all. So I'm trying to hear everything through my left ear. And just because I was able to have that conversation with the tech guys, the differentiation for me between needing audio boost so that I can hear the actors in the theatre, I can hear the actual dialogue, but also hearing the audio description track. And there are 3 channels. So I think they told me there was one for audio description, which I obviously definitely need, one for audio boost, and one that mixes both. Now, I couldn't get the one, which is often a problem for me, that has audio boost and the audio description track to work. I don't know if they channel one through one ear and one through another, because one ear doesn't work. But it led to me having a very creative experience. I managed to stay awake for the whole 3-hour performance, which was fantastic because I'm so tired of getting there. I often fall asleep. But I think what I had to do, and because the headset was very user-friendly, despite my difficulty navigating these channels, I had to keep switching from audio boost so I could hear the actors. And of course, it's a very dialogue-heavy play, and it's very beautifully done as well. So I wanted to hear that properly. It really did make such a significant difference to my hearing, but also obviously essential to hear the audio description track. So I was basically manually flicking just a gesture up and down throughout the whole performance, so that helped keep me awake. And of course, sometimes I missed the audio description, so I was too immersed in the dialogue that I missed the audio description track. But the audio description was actually quite economical and minimal and beautiful as well, and very qualitative rather than quantity. And I could see movement because with that little bit of residual eyesight. So I just had, it was very exhausting for me, I guess. But I was so tuned into the performance, and I really, really enjoyed it. It was just a fantastic production, and and they use the set very creatively. They've got mirrored panels that they move around, so with the lighting. And I can see the contrast and the movement of the dance. They used the dance to express a lot of what was going on with regards to the drama as well. It was just a fantastic experience. So I'll stop now. I'll ask me any questions that you want to, but it's quite unique to me, and it was absolutely a phenomenal performance. And the touch tour was amazing as well. And I liked the fact that minimal set, focus on costume. So there was a big, rectangular, the Littleton stage was very clear. And I seem to get more out of it, I think, because of the space that I was given and the quality of the audio description, which was phenomenal.
So would you say that that's one of the, if not the best experience you've had so far?
Absolutely. Yeah, fabulous. It was fabulous.
Can we go to Julie, because we haven't heard from Julie yet, and then Fran, and then back to Janet?
Hello, I'm Julie. I'm from Portland, Oregon in the US. Most of my experience has been describing live theater, but I'm also an ASL interpreter. And I just wanted to comment this whole conversation about what a person's background and experience is with their sightedness is really, and whether they were born blind or became blind later, is really fascinating to me, because it does very much parallel with deaf people coming to theater and saying, oh, I want pure ASL, or I want pure English, or I prefer captions and I want the captions to have the exact language, or I want the captions to have less language. And I think it does just really emphasize the different experiences. I'm not quite sure how to approach it. I know with like captioning for television, they can adjust the reading rate depending on who they believe the audience is to make it less words for younger viewers and, full words for faster readers, etc. And I don't know if there's anything that could be applicable. This conversation has raised that question for me. Is there a way to think about different opportunities, different presentations for some people who want and need more and some who don't?
I think there's a good point there, actually, Julie, because Shami just said there are 3 channels on this particular piece of kit. Potentially, that would be 3 different types of audio description that people could actually choose very minimal, or to some people actually want the story told. And when somebody said that to me the first time, they said, "Oh, you didn't tell me the story." I said, "Well, the actors are doing that." "No, I wanted you to do that." Okay, fine. Fran.
Hi, everyone. I'm tuning in from Australia this morning. I'm a describer rather than a description user, but I was about to say exactly what just came up, that in an audio description workshop a couple of weeks ago at the Opera House, a lot of the blind and low vision users were disagreeing about how much description they tended to want in film and television audio description in particular, and were saying how wonderful it would be if there were different options, the same way that there are different options on that headset, in streaming in particular, whether you wanted more minimal audio description or more focused on your interests. For example, there was one man there who wanted to know all about the fashion in anything that was being described because fashion was his particular bent, and someone else said that means nothing to me. I don't want to know about that. That's just clutter. That's noise. So to be able to have those options is very much an ideal. I know when half the time we're struggling to get any audio description onto a title at all, let alone multiple tracks. For the moment, what we do, if we're lucky with a provider, is provide an audio introduction, which has all of that information, or ideally a lot of that information that could be extraneous to some viewers, but it's really important to others. So then they can decide whether or not to tune in to that extra information or read it online or access it some other way. But I think that is potentially a future option of more bespoke AD to your particular tastes, because we can never suit all the people all of the time.
I've done similar with the audio introductions.
Yeah.
On RTE, and it really has got a really good reception from the VI community. And I'm just wondering, have you got any feedback so far with the introductions and how that is being taken by the VI community in Australia?
It's just positive because it's more and it's more options. So people don't feel like they have to tune in if they don't want the extra information, but it's there for those who do. And it's often it's just information that there's not time to add. Apart from cognitive overload, it just wouldn't be there otherwise. So with an audio introduction, you can access that in your own time, process it. You don't have to wonder whether it's going to be important or not, because it's in there only because of its potential importance.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it really struck me when Roz's mention of the bear, because one of our blind audio description users, who's also a writer now, was saying so often in film and TV there's these passing shots that are actually not important at all. They're filler. They're what we would call filler. Yeah. And it might be, a rose bush outside the stadium was her example. And if the audio description mentions that damn rose bush, she's thinking, why do I need to know about the rose bush? Is it be important? It's just filler.
Still, my most hated one is, well, it's not, it's on the top 5 anyway, is a seagull.
Often people will say the introduction is the one thing they can't do without. They will tune in, and if they don't get it, because with theatre, you don't get it so much. It's rare that you have the opportunity within film and TV. ITV did a couple. You were saying, Óran, that you were doing in TV.
I stole the idea, but and ITV, I think, in fairness to them, stole it from the Netherlands. But the first time I saw introductions was a series called Trigger Point.
Yes.
And one of the characters was from another show called Line of Duty. And the most interesting thing, it was a fantastic thing, but what was really interesting for me was it was actually the actor in character to read out the introduction, and I think it helps really, because rather than just being a standard voiceover that somebody you're hiring a voiceover artist to do, you're more in touch, I think, with the actual character themselves, and you get to know them a lot better.
I think introductions are absolutely key. I really do. Part of the thing I was doing was looking at the different types of memory that you use when it comes round to audio description. Do you mind if I go into there before I come to you, Janet? The first thing you do is you bring something yourself. You bring a semantic memory, which is it's kind of general knowledge. It's, you know, what do you use a kettle for? What's the difference between a sofa and a rocking chair? How many wives did Henry V have? You know, what's the capital of Australia? All of those things are general knowledge. So you bring that. We can't do anything about that. We can't do anything to enhance that. But the thing is that the most important is your working memory. And that's the memory that lets you hold and process information in real time. So it's like keeping track of what's being described while also following everything else that's going on, which is the dialogue, which is the sound, which is the music, which is the sound, particularly in theatre, or even if you're sitting somebody on the sofa next to you, they're crunching peanuts or crackling with their plastic water bottle, which is something that drives me nuts. And many people will be unable to use both visual and oral channels. And you'd think, oh, well, that, you know, somebody who was partially sighted would have that advantage because they might be able to use that visual channel as well as the oral channel. I was talking to Zoe Partington about this, and she said, you have no idea how difficult it is to be partially sighted and constantly having to stitch together fleeting images. So it's the working memory that I think we need to concentrate on. How do we support that? And you also use your auditory memory, and that helps you retain what you hear long enough to make sense of it. Not for very long. Your auditory memory doesn't last very long, but you get the actor's voices, you get the sound effects, and you get the description, and you can just hold it long enough to make sense of it. And then there's something which has nothing to do with memory, but is all to do with attention, which is your ability to focus. And that's one of the reasons why whenever I'm training, I say, close the mic unless you're talking. Because if you have the mic open while you're talking, you're going to have, it's like somebody reading over your shoulder, the tube.
Yes.
It's, you know, you've got this breathing or ambient sound, that kind of thing that's going on. And there are things that go against this. And what I've been told, what people have said to me, is that things that overload are too many objects mentioned in a short space of time. Something that's describing a room, and you describe absolutely everything, and all the photographs on the dresser, and every rug in the place, and, you know, and it's just too much to take in. And complex construction of sentences is another thing. We try not to get them to write beautiful language. We try. I tend to say, it's a bit like washing machine instructions. It's got to get to the point. Just make it straightforward. It's not easy reading so much, but it is straightforward. And something else is deciding if the information is relevant or it has consequence. We come back to the bear. You better be damn sure it's important. And if it isn't, then
don't do it.
Yeah. Those are the things that your working memory is, and this is what's coming from the people I talk to on LinkedIn and elsewhere. What we're asking them to remember is too much, and it often comes in one piece. The moon shines through a window. John kills Raymond. You know, it was just so bland. So I think it's vocal delivery as well. We call it in the UK, we call it scene sympathy, which means that we are changing our voice, changing our vocal delivery to pick up the mood of the piece. So we don't sort of stand away from it. It's not a speak your weight machine, but it's nothing too dramatic and actorly either. And it's a very fine line, but we must walk it, and just to find that way that supports the meaning. Whenever we speak, we emphasize particular words. I'm doing it now, emphasize particular words. We have to remember to do that when we're actually delivering the audio description. If I write something, for example, I write some things for National Theatre at Home, which is the streaming service from the National Theatre over here, and somebody else reads it, I go, no, that's not what I meant. No, you know, I know you need to do a pause there. You need to do a pause there. And the pause, the silence, I think, is a very important part of it. But there's a difference between a silence and a pause. And a pause is just chunking information. If I'm giving my phone number out to you, it's 078779656. But if I say, 07879 656. You probably remember it a little bit better. So there is that little bit of pause between the information. So if you've got a long space, you think, oh, I've got 10 seconds to fill there, which is, acres of time in audio description. You don't fill everything, and you just give one piece of information, another piece of information, another piece of information. So people have an opportunity to get one action, two action, three action. So there is just that little pause for them to go, okay, and gather their strength before the next piece of information comes at them. And that's known as chunking. And chunking is something that is neurologically, from all the reading I've been doing, neurologically chunking is one of the first things that you can do to help information be taken in easier. And that means leaving a tiny pause between that and the next piece of information. One of the questions I want to ask is, what do you expect of audio description? What do you expect it to be able to do? Janet.
I was going to say that hearing the introductory audio description is phenomenal. And I'm going to liken it to going to someone's house to a big feast, and you already know the menu. You can't wait to have it. And I think that's what the introductory audio descriptions are, just like that. I love them. I also do scripting and editing too. So I'm one who takes synonyms and counts the syllables and tries to get in something very descriptive with what can be there. And I just wanted to throw into the mix something that you just mentioned. I wanted to say sound effects and music. When you're a good audio describer, you know which sound effect is really important. And if the seagull is going by and you hear the sound of a bird, I'd like to know what kind of bird it is.
I have identified birds at some time because I've known that I've got an ornithologist in the audience.
And just different things, if they're obvious and it's a sound and you're not sure what it is, I think it's beautiful when you hear that sound and someone says what it might be. So,
equally, people say, I can guess, I know what it's like when a telephone rings. It's fine. You don't have to tell me a telephone.
That's obvious. That's something very obvious. There's no need for that because that sound effect stands alone.
But the audio describer, I think, also has to be very careful about it when they're describing a sound, is to allow there to be enough space between hearing that sound and saying what that sound is, if that's needed.
Yes.
Rather than talking over that sound, because that really ruins
the sound
ruins
is important.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. Very true. And that's where the audio describer knowing the script is very important.
Liz, I just wanted to know, when do you know enough is enough? Or when do you decide enough is enough with the AD?
I feel like I'm going to give a very unsatisfactory answer here. I mean, I always just try and follow the material. Roz was saying before, in theater, you're directed almost like the actors are, right? The lighting points you in a specific direction. The quality of it evokes a certain feeling, or it casts a certain light over the set or whatever. So since we've discussed Bridgerton, that's such a maximalist show. Every frame is just chock full of stuff. And in a million years, I could never describe all of it, right? Similarly, I kind of know that whoever is interested in watching Bridgerton, they're going to be interested in the wigs, the costumes, as well as, the little facial expressions, the jewelry, the props, kind of anything I can jam in there. I just kind of go by feel, right? I'll also add levels of verbosity in audio description is something that I have thought about a lot and that I've talked about a lot with a lot of people. And there are two really interesting things happening with that right now. One of them, a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, and a colleague as well. Her name is Maria Porto. She runs a company called Access Broadway New York, and she has come up with software that allows for levels of verbosity in audio description. So you can, it's like 3 settings. It's like, low, medium, and high, depending on what the audience member prefers. So low would be, entrance and exits and any jokes. Medium would be, would add a couple of extra, maybe some costumes and stuff like that. And high would just be the most possible, choreography maybe. And there's also an interabled dance company based in the US called Kinetic Light. I don't know if anyone's familiar with them. Yeah, but the way they do audio description, and they do it online for their remote performances as well. So if you're not familiar, you should check them out. They have multiple styles of description for each performance, and their app allows you to virtually move around the space so that you can listen to just one, and one of them might be very poetic and abstract, and one of them might be very technical and focused on technique of the dance, and one of them might be more focused on the sets and how the dancers move within it. And you can position yourself between two describers. So you can kind of hear, I mean, as much as you can process two things at once. It's extremely cool. Anyway, the short answer to the question you actually asked, Óran, is it's a very squishy combination of just really trying to pay attention to the material and trying to keep this sort of target audience for that in mind, and doing my best to serve both of them.
We've opened up a can of worms here, because this could go on for at least another hour, if not more. So I think we might have to come back to this subject again, Roz.
This will go online for people who are members of Audio Description Association, and there will be a handout on that. But if you want to have a conversation with me about it, I am on LinkedIn, but also my email is roz.chalmers@gmail.com.
And I'm also on LinkedIn as well, Óran O'Neill. Just for any of you who are not members of the Audio Description Association, please consider it. The next meeting will be on May the 26th, I think, and we're going to be talking to Lucía Gutiérrez, who has done a research paper on audio description and training. For the moment, thank you very much, Roz. Really appreciate it, and thank you to everyone who attended tonight. You were very kind to take the time to attend. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely talking to you.